Thank you so much for staying with the Fact Check. And of course, we now have our resident lawyer, Jacob Mumbia, to talk to us about the elections now. Earlier this week, Paul Chalimpa, who was the candidate running against Matia Kasaija in the Buyanja municipality race, pulled out of that race and got a job at the Uganda Investment Authority, a ministry under which Matia Kasaija himself works, which is the Ministry of Finance. Now, we want to first of all talk about under what circumstances can a candidate pull out of the race. There were earlier indications today that one of the presidential candidates is very likely going to pull out of the race, but we are still following that story to be able to bring it to you. Jacob, under what circumstances can a candidate in the Ugandan election pull out of the race?
Well, first of all, the candidate is at liberty to pull out of the race. They are at liberty to withdraw from the race, and that is allowed under the law. For instance, for a presidential candidate, he's allowed under Section 17 of the Presidential Elections Act to pull out of the race or to withdraw from the race. And for a parliamentary a member of parliament, someone contesting for a member of parliament could pull out of the race. It's also allowed under Section 20 of the Parliamentary Elections Act. So there are several reasons. It could be about the financing, or sometimes it could be about their abilities. Maybe they fall sick and they cannot carry on. So there are several reasons, but the important point is that it's acceptable under the law, but there are specific conditions, or there is a particular manner in which a candidate should withdraw from the race.
There were concerns that this could bring about some legal questions, that a candidate running against the minister pulls out of the race and gets a job in the ministry where the minister is actively leading. Are there any concerns there legally that we should be worried about?
Well, under the electoral laws, well, the allegation there could be bribery. But under the electoral laws, the kind of bribery that is envisaged under the Act is bribing the voter, not necessarily bribing a fellow candidate. And so in circumstances such as these, where one of the contestants allegedly offers another candidate a place in the Uganda Investment Authority, so in circumstances such as those, you could be looking at offenses under the Anti-Corruption Act, offenses like abuse of office. Yes, where the Honorable Minister uses his office to ensure that he's the only candidate running. So perhaps those could be addressed under our anti-corruption laws.
Jacob, let's talk about candidates and clashing at rallies. We saw this week the Alliance for National Transformation clashed with the NRM in Kalachi. At Kataku, you also saw the National Unity Platform clash with the NRM in Mbarara, and of course that led to an arrest. What does the law envisage on candidates campaigning within the same area?
Well, first of all, the Electoral Commission has the responsibility of prescribing the manner and the time of holding these campaign meetings, and that is prescribed under Section 21 of the Presidential Elections Act. And so the Electoral Commission, exercising that mandate, came out and issued guidelines, and apparently these guidelines are renewed. They keep updating them upon at the request of the candidates. Now, when the Electoral Commission has issued guidelines, yes, first of all, the law says that no candidate may campaign, no two candidates may campaign in the same parish at the same time, except where both candidates have consented or have agreed to such arrangement. And so where there are clashes, then there is non-observancy of electoral laws. And ultimately, the question would be, is that non-observancy, does it affect the elections, the outcome of elections substantially? And of course, that arrangement is intended to guard against things such as clashes or violence. You know, when you have candidates in the same place, you might have exchanges, especially between the voters. And so some of those are safeguards to ensure that you have a free and a fair election.
What's the role of the returning officer in circumstances like that?
Well, number one, the returning officer is supposed to prescribe the campaign schedule. Now, after they have prescribed the campaign schedule, then it becomes incumbent upon the candidates and their agents to ensure that they follow that particular schedule. Now, where let's say the opponent candidate who is supposed to be somewhere else decides to carry on his campaign activities in the same area that has been designated for another candidate, then the aggrieved candidate is at liberty to petition the returning officer to address that particular concern.
What kind of remedies are available in that case?
So one, when you report to the returning officer, he has the duty, one, to stop the meeting that is going on that infringes the particular schedule. And of course, that could be enforced through agencies, for instance, the police. Yes, but ultimately it gets back to who was authorized to be in that particular place at that particular moment.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Of course, our resident lawyer, Jacob Mumbya, there talking about candidates clashing in venues which had earlier been prescribed by the returning officer, but also talking about candidates pulling out of a race. How can that be done legally? We'll return with a fact checker next week on Monday at 8:30.